Hey everyone, welcome to Falcons Central Radio on Google Hangouts. We're on Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm Aaron Freeman, and you're looking at Scott Karasik as well.
Yes, you are. I'm getting the link ready to shoot out to everybody, so apologies if I'm a little distracted here.
Yeah, but tonight's show will feature a Corey Peters interview, and we'll be talking first a little bit about Falcons in the Hall of Fame, and then we'll continue with our positional analysis by talking about the Falcons cornerbacks. And as usual, we'll wrap up with your mailbag questions. And thank you for sending in several mailbag questions, so that should be fun. But let's start off with the Falcons in the Hall of Fame. You know, we're in July. Nothing happens in July unless you're the German soccer team. And, the Hall of Fame game is the first real game of football. Was it like August 5th or August 4th or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
The first real football game that says summer is finally over. We can finally get to somewhat cooler weather and NFL football.
So this year's Hall of Fame game will be a little bit different, or at least Hall of Fame weekend will be a little bit different because Claude Humphrey will be being inducted into the Hall of Fame. He will be the second Falcon, true Falcon, I guess. Technically Eric Dickerson is a Falcon Hall of Famer, but he played like 6 games with the Falcons.
And technically, Chris Dolman is too, and he played all of like 8 games with the Falcons. So I'm not counting those guys.
So we have
Tony Gonzalez is more of a Falcon than those guys, and he's going to go in as a Chief.
Yeah.
Whether we want him to or not, he's going to go in as a Chief. So yeah, there's a good group. I picked the guys who've been to Pro Bowls 5 times or more. I figure that's a good kind of cutoff for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So, got 6 names here. Mike Ken, Bill Fralick, Tommy Nobis, Jeff Van Note, Jesse Tuggle, and might get a little flack for this one, but Keith Brooking. It at least needs to be discussed.
Yeah, we'll discuss it.
And I'll even throw in a work done mention here.
It's worth discussing.
He was a unique fit as well. Because I think he's one of like 4 players at all time who have over 10,000 yards rushing and over 5,000 yards receiving.
Yeah. So how do you want to break this down, Scott? You want us to say whether obviously we probably think all of these guys should be in the Hall of Fame, but is it more a question of will they get in the Hall of Fame? Will they? Won't they?
It's more of a should they, shouldn't they, will they, won't they? We'll answer all 4 questions on each guy. So Mike Ken, unique player in his day, was a franchise left tackle for the Falcons back in the time before they had a legitimate franchise quarterback. In his early career, they got Steve I always get this one messed up because I always get confused between Chuck Barkowski and Steve Bartowski. Steve Bartowski was drafted around the same time as Mike Ken, and really kind of came on when Mike Ken went to the Pro Bowl 5 straight years. He was also an All-Pro twice. I'm just saying, Michael Strahan was only a 6-time Pro Bowler. Strahan was also only like a 3-time All-Pro. Is there really that much difference?
Yeah, I think in terms of Mike Ken, you can make the argument Mike Ken has the best career of any player that's ever played for the Falcons, just because he played so long and he played so long at a high level. The problem that he has is he played on a lot of losing teams throughout his career, and offensive tackles aren't sexy. So it's kind of like if you're the offensive tackle of the '90s Cowboys team because you played on a team that was stacked, you're going to look a lot better in a lot of people's eyes than someone like Mike Ken, who basically played on a bad or mediocre team for maybe all but like 3 out of like the 17 years he played in the NFL.
Yeah, it's they made the playoffs twice.
Yeah. So there you go. So it's like being I guess you could compare it to Tony Baselli, who played.
Yeah,
Well, I guess the Jaguars were good when Baselli was there, but they had a couple of rough years there, and like twice as long a career as Tony Baselli had. So I think he deserves to get in, but you know, he's been out of the league for almost 20 years now.
I think the
And
better comparison might be Chester Pitts.
okay,
He played, every year for the Texans from 2002 to 2010, or for 2002 2009. Never made the playoffs with them. The minute he leaves, they make the playoffs.
yeah,
And it's like he was a pretty good player. Like he obviously as an NFL guard, you're not going to get any love, but I thought he was very underrated and probably deserved to go to 3 or 4 more Pro Bowls than he ever went to, which was 0. So I think Mike Ken's that kind of guy. Had he played on, say, the Dallas Cowboys of that era, he would have probably never had a year in his career without a Pro Bowl.
yeah.
He was that damn good. And I think Bill Fralick was just as good, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And he played both guard and tackle. I think those two should both be in the Hall of Fame. But neither one are going to get – I don't think either one of them are going to go into the Hall of Fame. Of the same era, or actually a little bit earlier, Tommy Nobis, being the great linebacker that he was, it's kind of like Paul Posluszny, only way better, but was never on a team that made the playoffs, was never on a team that was really any good. I mean, they might have made the playoffs like once or twice, but come on now. He got screwed.
And the other thing about Nobis is he played in an era where there are a lot of other really good linebackers. Like he played in Butkus's era. I think Ray Nitschke was in his era. There's like 5 or 6 Hall of Famers, linebackers that played from like the mid 60s to like the early 70s, all alongside Tommy Nobis. So like it's basically like I guess the comparison is like being, I don't know, some really good receiver now, but when you play in the same era as Calvin Johnson or Larry Fitzgerald, or you can make the comparison like Roddy White. You have all these really, really good receivers that have played over the last 10, 15 years, and it's kind of hard to kind of rise to the top of that because you have so many other great players around you.
I'll agree with that, but just like Roddy White, Nobis was an All-Pro. Nobis showed that he was the best in the league for at least a year. He's had multiple people say, hey, this guy is one of the best linebackers of our era. Like Ray Nitschke was one of those guys that said, hey, this guy is one of the best players of our era. He needs to be in the Hall of Fame. And he still hasn't been put in. So, I mean, when Hall of Famers are saying this guy needs to be a Hall of Famer, I mean, it's tough because he should be there. Unless they open up a Legends vote for him, I don't see him getting in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's I don't know how they always vote like 2 old guys in every year or whatever, and I don't know when you become eligible for being the old guys vote, but I figure Nobis has got to be coming up on that pretty soon because it's been like 40 years since he played, so I don't know what the statute of limitations is. So I'm hoping that a couple of years over the next 5 or so years he'll get in on that, but again, it's been 40 years, so who knows?
I mean, I think Nobis will end up. I think he will end up in that Legends vote. I think it's 40 years after you retire is when you become in. And he retired in 76, so it'd be next year, or not next year, 2 years that he'd be eligible. But if he does get eligible for that, he deserves to be in.
Yeah, definitely.
He more than deserves to be in. Jeff Van Note, on the other hand, I hate to break it to you, you're a center. Like,
yeah,
it's like, no offense, but centers just don't get into the Hall of Fame. there's like two guys who've gotten in. It's like Dermontti Dawson's one of them. You got to be like a 10-time Pro Bowler and 10-time All-Pro and got to look like the king of the center position of all time to be voted in. It's just not happening.
Yeah. You take a guy like Nick Mangold, who's, been recognized as like the best center in the league pretty much for the last, 8 years or so. And he still probably is a long shot to get in the Hall of Fame,
Oh, yeah.
Just because it's the way the position is viewed, Ray Guy is obviously the greatest punter in NFL history, but it took him 30 years just to get on the finalist ballot for the Hall of Fame, and that just tells you that they don't really regard punters, and certain positions just don't get valued. And unfortunately for Van Note, who had, a very, very, I think he also played like 17, 18 years in the league, just as long as a guy like Bruce Matthews, who Bruce Matthews played the majority of his career at center, or at least half of his career at center. But because he played tackle and he played guard, he gets the benefit of the doubt playing some better positions.
You know what's kind of aggravating looking at who has all the Falcons, like most All-Pros and Pro Bowl votes, is you see how many offensive linemen and linebackers are on that list. And you're like, man, Atlanta has had some good linemen throughout the years. And then you look at last year's offensive line and you go, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And you look at last year's linebacker core and you're like, well, at least they still have the linebackers put together. They're raw, but they've got talent. Because, you got to think, you got Jesse Tuggle, you got Keith Brooking, you got Tommy Nobis, you got Captain Crazy Fulton Kuykendall, who's never went to a Pro Bowl but always deserved to go to one. I'm going to put that out there. Always deserved to go to one, never went to Pro Bowl. Some of the film that I've seen on him is just insane. Dudes, they call him Captain Crazy because he probably played with a concussion every game.
Yep.
He was just nasty. But no, I don't understand why Jesse Tuggle and Keith, I can understand why Keith Brooking isn't in. One, he is not even eligible for the vote yet. But two, outside of, 01 to 05, he was kind of a middling linebacker.
Yeah.
But I think it's safe to say 01 to 05, he was probably one of the best out there. It was him, it was, Urlacher, and I'm, blanking on who else, Ray Lewis. Him, Urlacher, Ray Lewis, there's 4 names, Takeo Spikes. And I can't think of, any other guy who was really better than him in the middle.
Well, with Tuggle, I got a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow with Tuggle because I thought he was unfairly left off the All-90s team, the All-Decade team that came out, 10 years ago. They put, Levon Kirkland on that list. And, it's one of those things that, for some of our younger watchers who don't remember when they did the All-90s team, but basically they were like, we're going to try to pick guys that were good throughout the entire decade, not guys that were really good at the end of the decade or really good at the beginning of the decade. And you look at the careers of Jesse Tuggle, and he made 5 Pro Bowls throughout the entire decade between 1991 and 98 or whatever. And then you look at Levon Kirkland, and he just made 2 Pro Bowls in 98 and 99. And just because the Steelers were a good team, and it was we need somebody else who can be a sort of inside-outside linebacker to make this team even, because we already put Hardy Nickerson and I can't remember who the other inside linebacker they put on, Junior Seau. And it was we can't put another middle linebacker, so it's purely at least in my opinion, political reasons why Jesse Tuggle wasn't on an All-90s team. He got robbed. He should have been on an All-90s team. That should have been his catapult to being in Hall of Fame consideration. But because if he didn't get it, he's going to get overlooked.
Let's put it this way, his average year, mind you, in the 90s was 150 tackles a year, a forced fumble, a fumble recovered, a half of an interception. Every other year he'd get a pick, and then 2 sacks every year. For a middle linebacker, that's ridiculous. That's one of the best middle linebackers that you can have. Like, that's the kind of year that I hope Paul Warlow has every year from this point forward. 2 picks, an interception, a forced fumble, a fumble recovered, a butt ton of tackles because he's doing his job. If Warlow had a year like that this year, 125 tackles, 2 sacks, a pick, a fumble forced, a fumble recovered, people would go, man, this guy's good. This guy's a monster. This guy's for real. And if he scored a touchdown every other year off of a fumble recovery the way Jesse Tuggle did, that would probably help out a little bit too.
Yep.
Every other year, takes one to the house. I mean, there's few linebackers who are as good in the middle throughout the entire 90s that are as good as Jesse Tuggle. I
agree.
mean, he deserves to be in. He deserved to have gone to more Pro Bowls than he went to. The fact that he only went to 5 is bullshit.
Well, there it is.
Keith Brooking, on the other hand, I mean, he was a hell of a linebacker for 5 years, but outside of that, I think he was pretty much average. And then 08 just kind of soured everything for me.
Yeah. I would say for Keith Brooking, there was probably like 3 of those Pro Bowls where I was like, yeah, he deserved to go. But I think like probably 1 or 2 of them he got in more on reputation. And, for some of our older fans, they may remember that at least when I was growing up, the Pro Bowl was just a popularity contest. And so basically the same guys got in it. That's why it was really hard for some offensive linemen to make Pro Bowls, because it was just basically who did I vote for last year? Oh, that guy? Boom. Like I remember one time Michael Strahan made a Pro Bowl and he only had like 5 sacks that year. And it was like, what? Like, I think Simeon Rice got bumped because he had like 16 sacks or something, and he was killing it for one of the best defenses in the league in Tampa Bay. And Michael Strahan got in on like a 5-sack season just because, he made it like the last 3 years, so let's put Michael Strahan in. And so that was kind of the way the Pro Bowl used to work. And, they've changed up the rules a little bit, so you don't really have that many issues. And hopefully fans are a lot smarter than just kind of, opening up their newspaper and looking at who's league leader in passing and he's going to the Pro Bowl, Steve Berline and stuff like that. But I think with Brooking, he was a good player. He probably, his Pro Bowl record is probably a little inflated because I don't think he was as good as Tuggle was, certainly in their primes, but I don't know.
He's not. He wouldn't be a Pro Bowler. He wouldn't. He shouldn't go in. He won't go in. He doesn't deserve to go in. On the names that do deserve to go in, Warrick Dunn pops up. And it's not entirely what he did with Atlanta. A lot of it has to do with how good he was for Tampa Bay as well. But he posted more rushing yards in Atlanta. He's more of a workhorse in the backfield for Atlanta. Of his 10,000 rushing yards, hold on, I'm just doing a quick calculator right here. Of his 10,000 rushing yards, 6,000 of them came in Atlanta. 5,000 of them came in Tampa. So sorry, he has 11,000, or just under 11,000. Of his receiving yards, his 43.39, most of those came in Tampa as opposed to Atlanta. But as an all-around, all-purpose back, he averaged 4.1 yards a carry. He averaged 8.5 yards per catch. He has a long run of 90 yards and a long catch of 86 yards. Over a 12-year career, he only fumbled 26 times. That's just over 2 times a year. He scored over, how much is it? He scored 64 touchdowns. I think the only thing that would hold him back is the amount of touchdowns that he missed out on because they were feeding T.J. Duckett.
And don't forget Allstott in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and Allstott in Tampa Bay. He'd do the bulk of the work. It's kind of, you ever seen Varsity Blues?
Yeah.
They had that running back who would do the majority of the work. And then they'd get in the red zone and they'd throw for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Warrick Dunn would do the majority of the work for those offenses. Then they'd get in the red zone and they'd say, "Oh, give it to Allstott. Oh, give it to Duckett." Or, "Oh, Michael Vick's running an end around." I mean, should you penalize a guy who was that good because of, let's put it this way, because of other reasons? Because his teammates were just as good, if not better, at certain things?
Well, work done is probably not going to get in the Hall of Fame. It used to be like the benchmark was get 10,000 rushing yards and you're going to Hall of Fame. But then a couple of guys, work done, I can't think of the other guy, but a couple of guys hit that benchmark and it's like, well, I don't know if he's really true Hall of Fame potential. So then it became like, oh, now you got to get 13,000 yards or something like that. But, that being said, the thing about work done you got to realize is the guy got 10,000 yards or 11,000 yards, and he's only 5'8", 180 pounds.
He's
That is an amazing accomplishment.
But he's 17th all time in total yards from scrimmage. That's the way I'm looking at it. Total yards from scrimmage, 17th all time. The guys ahead of him, Jerry Rice, Emmitt Smith, Walter Payton, Marshall Faulk, LaDainian Tomlinson, who we both agree will probably be in the Hall of Fame. Terrell Owens will probably be in the Hall of Fame. Tiki Barber will probably be in the Hall of Fame. Edgerrin James will probably be in the Hall of Fame. Randy Moss will definitely be in the Hall of Fame. Isaac Bruce will definitely be in the Hall of Fame. It's like Tony Gonzalez behind him will be in the Hall of Fame. Tim Brown should be in the Hall of Fame one day. Jerome Bettis, Ricky Waters. I'm not naming awful names here. I'm naming dominant players of their era. It's not like, and he's right there with them as a multi-time Pro Bowler. He's a Hall of Famer in my eyes. Even going down, Steven Jackson's 26th on the list. James Lofton, Franco Harris, Chris Carter, Fred Taylor, Andre Reed. I'm not naming horrible players here. I'm naming great players.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't end up in the Hall of Fame. Now, Roddy White. Do you think he's on that path to the Hall of Fame?
As I kind of hinted at earlier, I think the problem, and we're seeing this with guys like Andre Reed and Tim Brown and Chris Carter, who had seemingly had to wait forever to get in the Hall of Fame. It seems that Hall of Fame voters are very reluctant to put in wide receivers from this current era, just because they're just putting up ungodly numbers. And I think the issue with Roddy White, and this is going to be the problem when, you can certainly make a case that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but I think ultimately he'll struggle to get into the Hall of Fame unless he gets a Super Bowl ring. I think that's going to be the difference. That's going to be why a guy like Hines Ward gets into the Hall of Fame, because he has a ring, and why, someone, like Donald Driver, or that's not a good example because he has a ring, but somebody else who has similar production that I can't think of off the top of my head that doesn't have a ring like Roddy White probably won't get in the Hall of Fame. Is that fair? I don't know, but that's kind of how it goes. It's really like, the Hall of Fame voters is how many rings do you have, how many Pro Bowls do you have, and that's basically kind of how you boil down, the test. And I think Roddy's on the outside looking in.
I have to agree there. Until the Falcons win a Super Bowl with him, he's kind of, to use a term that my mother uses a lot, shit out of luck.
Yeah.
Just, it is what it is. I love Roddy White. I think he's a great player. I think he definitely deserves to go if he can maintain the same kind of pace he's on. And he's done something that only two other players in the history of the NFL have done, which might help him if anybody does any sort of research. But we're talking about Hall of Fame voters here. They don't really kind of do any of that. He had 6 straight seasons of 80-plus catches, 1,100-plus yards, and 6-plus touchdowns in all 6 seasons. And I think we could call that wide receiver number 1 numbers, if you will. The only other two players to do that are Torrey Holt, who I think we can all agree is going to end up in the Hall of Fame one day,
Mm-hmm.
and Jerry Rice was the other, who's the greatest of all time. Of course he did that. He's Jerry friggin' Rice. And they both had 8 straight years.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point you bring up, but even a guy like Torrey Holt, he's probably going to have to wait a couple of years. It's not like he's going to be, first or second ballot guy. And the thing that hurts Roddy is, when is he going to be eligible? Let's say he plays another 4 years with the Falcons. Then you have to wait another 5 years before he becomes eligible. There could be like 6 other guys that also achieve that, that benchmark that you just named over the next 9 years. And so that's going to hurt him ultimately when he becomes eligible for the Hall of Fame. And that's part of the dilemma of being a wide receiver in today's era. A whole lot of people are putting up great numbers, so it's kind of hard to figure out who. Torrey Holt, okay. Isaac Bruce, I don't think Isaac Bruce is going to get in the Hall of Fame, even though his numbers are pretty much identical to Torrey Holt's.
I don't see any way Isaac Bruce doesn't get in the Hall of Fame.
I don't think he's going to get in. I think he should get in, partially because he murdered the Falcons for 15 years.
Yards.
I don't know if he's going to get in, man.
He's 4th all time in career receiving yards. He gets
I know that's what I don't think he's. I don't think it's a
first chance to get in is next year. Isaac,
he might be
great resume. He's 4th in receiving yards all time. I think he's he's 10th in touchdowns. I mean, he's just insane. He had one of the best careers ever.
I think he might be like Art Monk. And if he gets in, he might have to wait 10 or 15 years.
He should get in. At some point, he should get in. Just like Reggie Wayne at some point should get in.
Mm-hmm.
Reggie Wayne was never the best wide receiver in the league. I don't think any year. But 6-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro. That's all you got. That's all you got. It's all you need in some cases. All right, Matt Ryan. Since he is the
Oh, Matt Ryan. I'm sorry. I thought you said Matt Bryant. I was like, oh, really? Is that a question?
I mean, I know Matt Bryant should be in the Ring of Honor and Great Balls of Fire and everything that you can put him in because he's awesome. But I'm just saying, in terms of his career, does he have a Hall of Fame career? How often do kickers get in?
Yeah. For Matt Ryan, I think for Matt Ryan, I think it's the same issue with Roddy White. I think, for quarterbacks, it's really about the rings. You have to put up ungodly production. You got to be Dan Marino and just set or break or come close to breaking all the passing records if you don't have any rings. And so if Matt Ryan gets a ring in the next 7 to 10 years, then sure. If he doesn't, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard.
Even if he somehow has, let's see, where's passing yards? Currently, all-time, Matt Ryan is, and this is going to be a little higher than you'd expect, 78th in passing yards. If you had, say, 4,000 yards this year, which is probably being conservative, he'd move up to 56th. If you had, say, another 4,000 the next year, he'd move up to 38th. And then another 4,000 the year after that, he'd move up to, the mid-20s in terms of career passing yards. He's bumping up pretty quickly on this list in just 3 years. Give him, say, 5 years, and he's at 43,000 yards. He's in that top 10. I mean, yeah, he's in a crazy era and all that, but if he can maintain production, he'll have more passing yards than Joe Montana in just 5 years, and he'll be 33. Quarterbacks don't seem to have their careers die until 38, 39, 40 now. As crazy as it sounds.
Well, we'll see. I think they're going to start grading guys on a curve because particularly quarterbacks and wide receivers that play in this era just because, they throw the ball way, way, way more now than they used to. You know, you look at Joe Namath's numbers, and they're god awful, but he's in the Hall. He's got a ring. You know, for his era, he was pretty good. You know, I hope Matt Ryan gets in, but again, I think it's going to be really hard for a quarterback, especially when you consider that he will be eligible potentially around the same time that guys like Aaron Rodgers and Ben Roethlisberger and Andrew Luck or whoever. It's just going to be a whole bunch of guys that are in the similar ballpark, and ultimately Hall of Fame voters are going to be like, does he have a ring? No? Okay, and then he's not getting in. If he has a ring, we'll think about it. So we'll see.
Here's another name for you. John Abraham.
Okay. This is tough because I think he needs to be in, but Abraham's hurt by the same Jesse Tuggle. He played on bad teams for a long time. And while I think people universally reckon
for 4 years out of his career, he was on a playoff team. 08, 09, 10, 12. He got to Atlanta in 06. He only had 3 years of 2 years of bad season, 1 year of just not making the playoffs at 9-7.
Okay, well, I was thinking about he spent like 5-6 years with the Jets.
6 years with the Jets, yes. And they made the playoffs twice with him.
Okay. I thought the Jets were worse than that when he was there. Okay, so ixnay on what I just said. I think
similar numbers to Michael Strahan too.
I don't know how it's going to work with sack guys because there's a lot of guys that are in that 100 sack club that aren't in the Hall of Fame. Who's the guy from Leslie O'Neal from the Chargers? I can't think of whoever else, but there's a couple other guys, and it's just like, I don't know. Sure, I think Abraham deserves to be. I think Pro Football Focus would certainly back up the fact that he's arguably the best pass rusher over the last 6 years collectively. He's been top 5 on their pass rush rankings every year, so why not? But
well, if he gets another, say, 6.5 sacks, he's in the 140 sack club, which has a total membership of 6 guys. And the only one that's not in the Hall of Fame is Kevin Green, which I don't know why he's not in the Hall of Fame. That's a friggin' travesty.
He's been waiting a couple of years, too.
He was better than Chris Dolman. And Dolman was a Falcon. Like, I should be taking Chris Dolman's side on this one, but no, he was better. He was a more consistent pass rusher than Chris Dolman. He was the Jared Allen of his era. Consistently putting up 10-plus sacks. I think he had like 2 years that he didn't have 10-plus sacks in a streak, and one of them he had 9 from 88 to 99. Before that, he was meh. But after that, once he finally figured out how to play in the NFL, he just went off. Even his second to last year, he was 37 years old. He put up 15 sacks. I don't see any reason why Kevin Green's not in the Hall of Fame. All right, so
let's do this cornerbacks.
Let's take a quick pause for the Corey Peters interview.
All right, we'll do that.
All right. I'm sure those couple of y'all watching us are like, what the heck just went on there? We pre-recorded the Corey Peters interview, so it'll be on the podcast version, but not on this version. Apologies. Yeah. We'll put a link on the YouTube page for it. Now, cornerback analysis. We've got 7 guys on the roster right now. Desmond Trufant, Robert Alford, Robert McClain, Josh Wilson, Javier Arenas, Devontae Glover-Wright, and Jordan Maben. Trufant and Alford, safe to say they're starting, right? Yep. Question is, who's going to be the next 3? You got a guy who's going to be a nickel, and I think Robert McClain's pretty much safe because he's a good special teamer. He's got return value. He does a little bit of everything. They just kind of say, hey, you do this, and he goes, gotcha. I'll take care of it. So he's the perfect kind of guy you want for your team. Worst case scenario, if he ends up as the 5th best cornerback on the roster, which I doubt that happens, he's still a great special teams player. He still provides a ton of value for you if you get injured. He's started quite a few games throughout his career, and he's been an excellent nickelback, at least in 2012. 2013, he had some issues, but I kind of look at it this way. 2012 was his rookie year. 2013 was kind of like sophomore slump year.
That's a fair way of putting it.
2014 should be like his, hey, this is what I really am. And it'll probably be somewhere in between, or it'll be better than his rookie year. But I don't think he's going to be as bad as he was last year. He had some, I think a lot of the issues last year had to do more with the pass rush being non-existent.
Yeah.
So, who do you think ends up winning the nickel? McClain, Wilson, Arenas?
Do that.
Gonna be who?
I think it's going to be McClain.
I'd agree with that. Now, there's one spot after McClain. Oh, I know who I forgot to put on here. I always forget about him. Ricardo Allen from Purdue. And I forget about him, not because he's forgetful, but because it's like, hey, we've got 3,000 nickelbacks. Yeah. He's just another one on the list.
Next time you do the list, you'll forget Javier Arenas. So,
No, I never forget Javier Arenas.
Okay.
I remember the Falcons signing him and people going, oh, this means that they're not going to get Devin Hester. And I remember going, man, that's just a stupid way to look at it. Javier Arenas is not better than Devin Hester as a return man. I mean, no matter how you cut that one.
Yeah.
Even at his regular position, Javier Arenas is not a better cornerback than Devin Hester is a wide receiver. And Hester's not exactly lighting up the world as a wide receiver, but I do think that Matt Ryan and him are going to have a better connection than Jay Cutler and him. Because Cutler just did not like him.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And then Josh Wilson can play inside or outside. He's like, I hate to put it this way, I think Robert McClain's ceiling is probably going to be a slightly better Josh Wilson. He'll be in the league forever. He'll almost always be a nickelback. If you need him to play outside, he can do it, not look horrible. But his best position is the nickel.
That's fair.
And I think Ricardo Allen is that Kevin Mathis best case, or worst case, and then Brent Grimes best case. I don't see him as Brent Grimes, though. I don't think he ends up getting that close.
Yeah, Brent Grimes is an anomaly. There's, when you look at where Brent Grimes should have ended up, considering how long he's been in practice squad and NFL to Europe, and then starting and then getting benched and then coming back and starting again, it just, that sort of thing, you can't ever predict that sort of stuff. So, if Ricardo Allen is half the player that Brent Grimes is, great. That'll be wonderful. I'll take that any day of the week.
That's Kevin Mathis.
Yeah.
That's a career nickel and dime guy who has good special teams value. NFL teams are built on guys like that. If you don't have guys like that, you don't have a great NFL team. You've got a team that just, hey, we've got this role player who can do this one thing very well, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Not, oh, hey, we've got this role player who can also play nickel corner, who can also play dime corner, who can also, if need be, go to the outside and, cover a slower receiver in a zone so that we can match up our top 3 corners on their top 3 receivers in a 4 wide receiver set. I think that's going to be Ricardo Allen's best bet, and he's a playmaker. He might end up moving back to safety. In a worst-case scenario type deal. He might end up moving to safety, which isn't a bad situation either. Now, Jordan Maven, Devontae Glover-Wright, I haven't seen much of. I don't think either one makes the roster. I do think Glover-Wright might make the practice squad, but I don't think either guy's going to sniff the roster. They both have this camp body kind of feel. This Peyton Thompson kind of Marty Market kind of thought about him.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're watching this and you go, who the hell is Peyton Thompson? Who the hell is Marty Market? That's kind of the point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I agree with that on Glover White and Maben. I think the team probably wants Ricardo Allen to make the team, so I think we can kind of pencil him into the CB5 spot. So I think it's really about like the big battle is going to be Wilson versus Arenas for that fourth spot. And you correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, because all this stuff I can't keep in my head. But whoever's the cheaper one probably has the leg up because when it comes down to the final roster, if you can save 50,000 this way, 100,000, that can wind up in a dead heat sort of battle. And also
And when
given
they're
the fact
costing the exact same amount.
okay, well that goes out the window. Okay, let's say, I
Then
think
it's based on pure talent. Then it's whoever's actually better. I like that better. It's not about money. It's about who's actually better. Is Wilson actually better? Is Arenas actually better?
if I was a betting man, I'm gonna say Arenas probably gets the job. Uh, just because I think he's got Scott Pioli in his corner. He can also return kicks. That's always valuable. And he's younger, and based off of how Josh Wilson played last year, I would say Arenas has got a little bit more in the tank than Josh Wilson does. I'm a Josh Wilson fan, but if you watch that 49er game where Anquan Bolden just absolutely destroyed him, it was probably one of the worst cornerback performances I've ever seen. And that's
Saying a lot as a Falcons fan.
I was wondering if you were going to make that joke, but yeah.
I mean, Chris Owens 2010, was it worse than that?
Yeah, it might have been. It might have been.
Well, in that case, you don't want Josh Wilson. I've been kind of penciling Josh Wilson into that spot instead of Arenas. And if he's been looking like Chris Owens, you might be better off putting me out there.
Well, I guess the good thing is he's not going to see Anquan Bolden this year, at least not in the regular season. So, he doesn't have to worry about giving up like 180 yards and like 2 touchdowns. It was ridiculous. It was just bad.
He also won't be playing outside this year. No, like no matter how you cut it, that's Alford and Trufant's.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're doing. Let's see. I'm just pulling up the schedule for this year. So, you got AJ Green and Cincinnati's good group. New Orleans has a solid group. Minnesota has a solid group.
A lot of big receivers.
Yeah, Chicago has a solid group. The Ravens have Steve Smith, who, God, I hate Steve Smith. Like, I don't hate him as a person. I don't hate him as a player. Like, he's a great player. I hate having to face Steve Smith.
Yeah.
I'm going to preface it that way. Like, yeah. I love that he's a competitor. I love that he's an excellent player, but going against him is like, man, he's going to put up 150 yards. That's...
It was like Falcon fans. Oh, Steve Smith's getting cut by the Panthers? Yes. He's signing with the Ravens? Dang it. we gotta play him again?
But on the bright side, instead of seeing him twice a year, you only got to see him once this year.
Yeah.
And then you don't ever have to see him again until he signs that one-day contract with Carolina. Thanks for having me, guys. Man, I hated having to see Steve Smith across the field. That's like, no. So it's the way I feel about Cam Newton. Like, I'm sure off the field he's a great guy. On the field he's an excellent talent, but I hate him. I don't hate him as Cam Newton the player. I don't hate him as Cam Newton the person. I hate him as Cam Newton the guy that the Falcons have to face. Like, why do they have to play this guy twice a year?
Yeah.
It's frustrating. Just like the Duggernaut. I don't like facing him twice a year. Just like Drew Brees. let's be honest here. Drew Brees is a top 3-4 quarterback in the league.
Yes.
You know, for the longest time, it was Brady, Brees, and Manning. Now it's Brady, Brees, Manning, and Rodgers. Like, well, I might even say Rodgers and then the other three. But still, like, I hate having to go against Drew Brees for 2 times a year, because he's slippery in the pocket. That's what makes the New Orleans pass blocking look good. Not that they're actually great; they just know how to block for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm jealous of that.
Yeah.
Because I want the Falcons pass blocking to know how to block for Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if we move these guys in this area, you know how to step up, right? Yeah, I'll figure it out. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Just nailed it.
I mean, no, I like Steve Smith. And then you got Tampa Bay's giant group. You got Cleveland. Well, never mind.
Yeah.
It's Cleveland.
You can cross Cleveland off the list. Yeah.
Their best receiver just got caught with pot again.
Yeah.
Green Bay, they're a solid group. Arizona, I don't really know what's going on out there. I know they let my boy go. They let Andre leave. So I feel like their third receiver is not as good as it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear me say that all year. Because they let my boy leave.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's get to these questions.
Yep.
Mailbag time. We've got a pair of questions from Dave Kent, a pair of questions from Jesse Lalumendra, and I probably butchered your name, and I apologize for that. We got a question from the DW and from Josh Games. So we're going to lead off with Josh's question. What are the chances one of the wide receivers besides Julio Jones, Harry Douglas, or Roddy White breaks out this year?
I'd say, if we're talking like a 1,000-yard season, no chance. If we're talking like a 500-yard season, I think, Johnson, might have a shot at getting that if, someone gets hurt. But probably not very high. I mean, you're basically hoping. You're not hoping, but it's basically someone has to get hurt for that to happen.
I don't think Darius Johnson even makes the roster, if you want the honesty. I think Drew Davis could, but I think if anybody breaks out for any sort of season, it's going to be Levine Toilolo. I don't think any of the wide receivers will do anything. I think Toilolo might shock people, throw up a 60-catch, 700-yard, 10-touchdown season, and people go, where'd this guy come from? Just because the way Atlanta's going to use him is, hey, 12 yards, go, jump, catch, good job. Like, hey, it's 3rd and 8, stand 9 yards past the line and just make yourself tall. We're going to throw it 12 feet in the air, and we just want you to jump up and get it. So I think in that kind of situation, Toilolo is going to have a lot more value, basically doing what Tony Gonzalez did last year with a little more speed, or a lot more speed. I just don't see any wide receivers having a great year. The DW asks, thoughts on Matt Ryan's exclusion from the player-voted top 100?
How many? It was like 14 quarterbacks, and like Stafford was like number 100, so I guess he was the 14th guy. So it was a little surprising to me that Matt Ryan was left off the list. I figured he would go somewhere in like 85 to 90 range.
There aren't 14 quarterbacks better than Matt Ryan. And there's no way the players voted on this, because there's at least 14 players who said, I never got a ballot. What are they talking about? No one in our locker room got a ballot. Who are these players that are voting on this thing? Which makes me think they either have to sign a confidentiality agreement before they do it, like, hey, I'm not going to tell you who voted on it, or they're going to go, or they really just didn't send out the ballots, and the players they're asking are all retired guys, like, I don't know, Shannon Sharp and Solomon Wilcots and all the people on their panel, like Warren Sapp, who's not exactly a brilliant guy. Yeah, his tipping thing kind of throws me off there. let's put it this way. I think it's bullshit. Matt Ryan should be at least the 10th quarterback, at best the 6th quarterback. He's in that range. No matter how you cut it, he's in that range. I personally have him as my 7th best quarterback in the league. I know a lot of guys who have him as 10th, whatever, in that range. I think pretty much everybody can agree he's in that 6 to 10 range. There's no way there's 14 quarterbacks better than Matt Ryan in the league right now.
Yeah, it's just to me, like I can get why people would vote Cam Newton higher than him because he's, his team had a better year. I can get, Russell Wilson, all those guys that I don't think are better quarterbacks than Matt Ryan, but because they play on better teams, how that sort of works out. But I don't get why anybody would vote Matt Stafford better than Matt Ryan. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, nothing against Stafford or something against Stafford because he's not that good, He's got a cannon for an arm, but other than that, he sucks. Like, Stafford is not good. He plays on a bad team. He throws a million interceptions, stupid, boneheaded interceptions, and why he could be on the top 100 list and not Matt Ryan, to me, is garbage. It's not like he threw for 5,000 yards last year, like he did a couple of years ago. It doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. So, bullshit. Yeah, I said it too. Jesse Lalamandra, whatever his name is. Okay. He says, what is the overall rating do you believe the Falcons will be in this year's Madden game?
I think Madden's going to screw him over. How do I put this? Like 81, maybe. That's probably being generous. Probably like a 79.
Yeah, they're coming off a 4-12 season. It's going to be hard for them to get out of the 70s. So, if they're 80, 81, then that's Madden basically saying we think this team is a lot better than what their record is. But, when you're coming off a 4-12 season, it's really hard to be higher than like a 78 or a 79.
It really is. Like, yeah. I don't see him being much higher. And then from the Falcons' current roster, which player would you choose to describe yourself?
I'm going to say Jonathan Babineau because I am just like Babineau in that I am underrated in how great I am by everybody. I am pure greatness, and it's not usually recognized by the world at large, and so there is my Falcon analog.
I'm going to go with my boy, Paul Warlow. Underrated, hardworking, behind the scenes, there's leadership there, but you don't see it kind of thing if you just kind of meet me up front, but it's there. You know that something's going on behind the scenes, and I'm busting my ass to help out. So I'd like to say I'm like Paul Warlow. I'm always trying to improve myself in terms of, writing, selling cars, whatever I'm doing. I'm always trying to be the best at it. Even if I'm not the most naturally gifted, I'm the hardest worker right there. I will say that. All right, Dave Kent. What's more likely, Falcons have a top 10 defense or a bottom 10 defense?
Well, I guess, are we considering scoring defense or total defense? Like, scoring defense, I think top 10 is better than bottom 10. Total defense, probably bottom 10 is more likely than top 10 because that's usually how it goes with the Falcons.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with giving up empty calories.
Yeah.
If they're a bottom 10 defense in yardage but a top 10 defense in pretty much every other metric, I'm happy. As long as they're top 10 in sacks, top 10 in interceptions, and top 10 in scoring, that's all you really got to be top 10 in. That means you got a pass rush. That means you're creating turnovers, and that means that you're, hell, not even top 10 interceptions, just top 10 in turnovers. Just create turnovers. That's all I care about. Get the ball back, shorten drives. and top 10 in third down defense. I think they'll be top 10 in the others.
Well, I did some research, for once, and I looked at, even if you threw out last year's, if you look at scoring defense and total defense, and you threw out last year's numbers and say that was a fluke, their average ranking in scoring defense from 2008 to 2010 was like 11th. So, but their total defense was like 19th. So that kind of, they don't, they're a bend but don't break sort of defense. I don't think that's going to change this year. And if obviously all the success we had from 2008 to 2012, if that's what they are again this year, that's not a bad thing. Obviously, the goal is to be never break and never bend defense, but that's more down the road. So we'll see.
And then the final question of the night, final part of the night: do the Falcons have the fourth best roster in the NFC South?
This isn't going to be popular, but I would say if you counted all the positions evenly and you said quarterback is just as valuable as long snapper and outside linebacker and all that type of stuff, then yeah, I think, the Falcons probably are in fourth place, not by a huge margin, but I would say pound for pound, the Panthers and Tampa Bay have a little bit better talent in certain areas of the roster where the Falcons are a little questionable at. But when you figure that, we have a pretty good quarterback who deserves to be in the top 100, and, certain other key areas of the roster, I wouldn't say that we're the fourth best. But
let's kind of go down and break down the units. Quarterback, is that the fourth best in the league or in the NFC South? No, I'd say they're probably second. Running back, Carolina probably has the edge there, but I think they're a better running back unit than New Orleans and Tampa. Well, Tampa Bay and Carolina have a better edge there. I think they've got the best receiver unit, hands down, in the NFC South right now.
Yeah.
Tight ends, I think they're probably at the bottom, though. But there's a lot of potential there. Offensive line, I think Carolina's got an awful offensive line. Awful right now. Nate Chandler's their starting left tackle. Awful. However, I do think that they've got a solid defensive line in Carolina. But Atlanta probably has the third best offensive line, probably the third best defensive line. When it comes to linebackers and other front seven players, Atlanta's probably second there just because it's kind of a weak spot in the NFC South. I mean, yeah, you've got Levante David, and you've got Luke Kuechly, and you've got New Orleans group who, like let's put it this way, Junior Gillette is not great, but you can get 10 sacks because he runs that arc well. That's how almost all of his sacks came, just right on the arc. So, do I like New Orleans group? Not really. It is what it is. Yeah, that is what it is. Junior Gillette, solid player, but Curtis Lofton, solid player, but no. Cornerbacks, I don't think anybody has a great proven group of cornerbacks in the NFC South right now, outside of Tampa. Al Verner and Jonathan Banks are going to be great in Lovey's defense. But other than those guys, I don't think anybody's proven in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And then in safeties, I think, every team's got one good safety and one awful safety. Like Tampa, Mark Barron's good. Deshaun Golston is way overpaid and bad. Carolina, both theirs are bad. Thomas Deku and Roman Harper are awful at this point in their career. They're awful. They're garbage. New Orleans, Jarris Bird's good, but he's coming off of a back surgery. And Kenny Vaccaro is good, but he's coming off of a knee surgery. It's not that they're bad, they're just injured. So I don't really understand how Atlanta has the fourth best roster when you kind of just go by position, you're like, at least they're close. You know, at least they're like second. They're second or third. There's no way they're fourth.
Okay.
Even if you rank everything the same, I don't see any way that they're fourth.
Okay. Well, okay.
And I think their special teams unit as a whole is better than pretty much everybody else's.
Okay. You got no argument for me, you know. Yeah. So that's our show. Hope you guys enjoyed it. You know, stay tuned for that Corey Peters interview. You'll hear that later this week. We'll definitely tweet that out. Obviously, get those mailbag questions into us as usual. I'm at FalcFan. Scott is at Scott Karasik. Hit up the show at Falcons PFC. Use the hashtag Falcons Mailbag. It makes it easier to find your questions. Next week, we'll be breaking down the safeties in our positional analysis. That will be the last one, unless I can convince Scott to talk about long snappers the week after that. But you know, we're gearing up towards training camp and Hard Knocks, and certainly once August hits, we'll have plenty of stuff to talk about. But
have a good week.